AA Beyond Belief is a podcast by, for, and about people who have found a secular path to sobriety in Alcoholics Anonymous. Hello and welcome to our Friday live stream. Tonight we'll be talking about decision making. How are you at making decisions? Is your decision making process different now than that you're in recovery? Are you better at making decisions? Let's talk about it. This is a completely interactive podcast, so please remember to send your comments through to YouTube and Facebook or call us at our toll-free number 844-899-8278. We'd love to hear from you. Angela, how are you doing over there?
Doing well. I was just finishing eating some salted caramel cluster cashew milk.
Oh, that sounds pretty good.
That sounds pretty good. It's super, super sweet. I usually only have it with coffee because it's that sweet, but you know, it's Friday night and I got to go a little bit wild.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I'm doing well. How about you?
I'm doing great. I had the day off today, and I actually spent it writing an essay about decisions. So I'm ready for this podcast today. I've given it a lot of thought.
You are wild.
Yes, I wrote a 5-paragraph
take a day
essay.
day off work and spent it writing an essay.
Yeah, well, I've been trying to improve my writing anyway, and I thought, well, I may as well, get ready for this podcast and write a little essay about it. So.
Sounds good.
Yeah. As I was thinking about, decisions, the one thing that occurred to me, well, there's a couple of things, but the underlying theme that came to my mind was that decisions, my ability to make decisions had a lot to do with the measure of the unmanageability in my life. So in other words, during my drinking years, when my drinking was really bad, I essentially wasn't making decisions. I mean, I was just reacting to whatever crisis was going on at the time and doing whatever I could do to survive. And I was really reacting from instinct, the fight or flight instinct. And in my case, I was usually fleeing.
Flighting.
Yeah, but it was like a really messed up life because I didn't have the ability to make changes. And then when I, got sober, when I stopped drinking and got into AA, it wasn't like things just changed overnight for me. And I still didn't have this ability to make good decisions. And interestingly enough, those first 90 days of my sobriety is when I had some of the most consequential decisions to make. And I relied on my old way of just not making the decision, just being stuck in fear, and avoiding it. And so just waiting for basically calamity to come my way. And then once calamity come my way, I just hoped that I'd climb out okay. That's just the way I lived my life. And that was unmanageable. And so I thought, you know what? It really wasn't until I learned how to make decisions that I could have some sort of control over my life. That, and of course, not drinking,
Right.
So, yeah. So that's kind of the conclusion I came to as I was writing. So hey, Stephen, how you doing? Hey, Jackie, good to see you all there. And I know Joe is watching on Facebook.
Hey, everyone.
So what are your thoughts? Where do you think this conversation should go?
Well, I was thinking a little bit about, before quitting drinking, which sounds kind of strange, but, prior to recovery, my life was pretty unmanageable. I didn't have a lot of tools, or healthy tools to use to deal with, any sort of adversity or, difficult situation. I went from job to job. I didn't take a whole lot of thought in who I hung out with, any of that kind of stuff. So, and then when I was drinking, it was nice to, just not think about those things. it wasn't as great the next day when I'd have to go pick up my card and, had an unreasonable tab that I couldn't afford, those kinds of things. That wasn't pleasant. So my life was pretty unmanageable. In early recovery, when we thought of this topic, I'm like, well, you only have to make one decision, and that doesn't mean you have to do it. You just, the frogs on the log type of a thing. But really, I think that learning how to make good decisions, I started to gain some skills in, working the steps. And maybe I could even say before that, just going to meetings, making that a habit, doing the suggested, 90 and 90 type of thing. And finding a group of people within AA, a home group that I did service work with. All of those things were contributed to, my ability to start making decisions, or to at least understand how some people made better decisions than I did, and then I think, looking at my behavior and the way I had thought about things prior, through the steps, for 6, 7, that kind of thing, helped me to, see where I was going wrong in my thinking. So I guess cognitively speaking, it would say cognitive thinking errors helped me to understand, that I didn't always see situations or perceive reality correctly, and that I had a habit of doing that, and that these were some of the examples of where that was definitely something you could see.
And I found that incredibly confusing when I was like in my first year or two, I guess, because I did have, I've mentioned before that my recovery, especially the first 2 years, was not easy. And I was still trying to take care of just the basics of life, and so I was often confused because I was in some sort of situation and I couldn't trust my perception of what was actually going on. But at least I was aware that I couldn't trust my perception of what was going on. That was a good step in the right direction anyway.
Yeah.
But, it was difficult.
And I think that, some of the things that we get, and I guess it depends on where you attend meetings as well. I've heard in some meetings, even within the same town, so like even in this location, where new people will come in and they still say things like, to sit down, shut up, and, and listen, or whatever. And that you don't have anything important to say until you've got so many days sober or whatever, which, I never thought was, effective, important, or necessary to say. And I never, listened anyway. I said what I want when I wanted to. And so, so one of the things for me was like actually just sharing what was really going on. So sharing if I was stressed about something, or the time that I moved out of one place into another with somebody I knew, but suddenly, they're just bringing in tons of bottles of booze. And that, I didn't know what to do because I didn't have enough money to be able to get another apartment or move someplace else or whatever. I was greatly in debt, and living month to month, I was still behind, that kind of a thing. And so, so those were things that I truly didn't know how to handle. And prior to recovery, I either avoided those or pretended they didn't exist, or, which always made them worse. And in early recovery, I still didn't have the means to make a lot of meaningful change in the ways that I would have liked to. I still had the fantasy of going to, some posh country club resort for my first 6 months of sobriety. And, and I always fantasized that would be so much better. But the truth was I wasn't in that position, and I had to learn it as I went. And, and I think that's been part of, the success for me, is that I didn't have any of the fantasy fly away stuff. So when I did my fifth step, that too, I wanted, to go to the beach and read it on the beach, and then, have a ceremony, or I don't know what I wanted, but it was much more romanticized in my brain than, sitting outside of a coffee shop and, or whatever it was. That was not part of how I thought the whole experience was supposed to go. But it's how it went. I had to keep a day job while I was doing the steps, and I wanted to be, have this be my only thing that I concentrated on. And it wasn't. And so I had to live life, continue living life, continue to make some mistakes, while learning how to make fewer mistakes. So that's part of it. And then, by bringing stuff to meetings, and talking about it, then I got a lot of different, responses of how other people had, dealt with similar experiences. What are the tools that they learned?
That is so valuable. That is what I still rely on that. And that has probably, that is probably more than anything that I ever did in AA helped me with my decision making, was just talking to people about what was going on, so that I can make a decision, and listening to people who have been through similar situations. So that was a huge game changer for me.
Right. Yeah. I kind of talk about it like the game show, poll the audience. So it's where I share something and then get to hear, a lot of different responses on how people have dealt with it. And the funny thing is even when other people have brought things up they were dealing with, and I didn't have experience with it at that time, a lot of it stayed with me, even though I wasn't necessarily focusing on, the conversation or the meeting or whatever, that just going to enough meetings maybe, or listening at the time, when those problems did come up, I had some ideas on directions to go to help resolve them, or to help calm myself if it was something that I couldn't necessarily resolve. And so sharing in meetings was a really big tool for me, and still is, on both helping to center myself, get clear on whatever the problem is, because sometimes it presents itself in a way that is not actually what the problem is. But my talking about it, saying it out loud, helps me to clarify that, and so I often feel better just by talking about it. But then it also, puts it out there to my community to be of help to me. And so then that helps them stay sober as well, because, they're being of service to me just by sharing their experience. So that's kind of some of the things I know early on that helped me and still help me, particularly the learning my thinking errors and recognizing that was something that was a pattern that I needed to learn how to do differently. When I was thinking about this, it also made me think about when I learned to do some of these things with decision making differently, that it felt weird, that it felt different to make different decisions or to use different tools to make decisions. And one that I've mentioned before, but is still a good one for me is when I'm asked to do something, saying, let me get back to you, so that I could actually think about it. Because, in early recovery, I had heard the adage that you never turn down an AA service request. And so I developed resentments on, some of this service stuff that I did because I either, didn't think that it was important, or I didn't have time to do it, or, things like that. But I didn't feel like I could say no. And that was the same in a lot of my life, other areas of my life. I didn't feel like I could say no to things. And so I just had way too much going on. And then my self-esteem would get lower because I couldn't fulfill or, follow up on these commitments. And so learning to say, let me get back to you, gave me some time to think about, what are the commitments that I currently have in my life, and do I have enough time for this one, or if this one is more important than something else, can I let something else go? But it just bought me time to be able to think about things, and as Dale says, be less reactive, to situations, and more mindful. But it hasn't been easy for me, and it didn't even come in the first 5 years. I mean, I started getting better at it, but it's only been in like the last, I don't know, maybe 7 years that I feel like I have more ability to make better decisions. Like I have more agency to do that, and I can be more intentional about it. And some of that is learning new tools. Some of it's being sober long enough to continue to improve my brain and create new neural pathways and, neuroplasticity and all that kind of fun stuff. And some of it is by trying new techniques for making decisions and failing at them, or I guess technically most of the decisions aren't, maybe a failure. It's, I guess, more about like how committed I am to the results or something like that. So it's like how committed to the outcome am I in whatever this decision is. And if I have a certain idea of how I want it to go and it goes differently, do I gauge that decision as being a bad decision, or was it maybe a good decision and it just didn't go the way that I wanted it to, but it's still a good decision,
That's very important, I think, too, is it's something I learned, I guess, the hard way, is that, all I can do is make the best decision I can make with the information that I have, and then let the chips fall where they may. Fortunately for me, most of the decisions that I run across in my day-to-day life aren't critical. They aren't like the life and death types of decisions, or the, that I was dealing with during my crisis periods of my life, but still they're little decisions that can add up over time if I'm not really stopping, like you're saying, and thinking about it and telling people, hey, I'll get back with you. Before I know it, I'm really overwhelmed, and that's really one area where I actually do need to work on is what you just suggested, is telling people, hey, let me get back to you on that, because oftentimes I'll just say, yeah, I'll do it. And then I look at my calendar and say, oh my God, I already got something to do then. It's like, what am I even thinking? So it's like what Dale was saying, it's a matter of being less reactive and more thoughtful and mindful. And I'm like that with the big things. If I'm having trouble at work, or if I'm having a serious relationship problem, or something that's really, really serious or more serious, then I'm much better at taking the time to figure out what is going on with me. What do I need to do, and taking and going through all the steps. Because I have a little bit of a process that I go through when I make decisions, and when they're important decisions,
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I learned, I think it was from Wally, to some extent of asking myself, what a responsible, rational person would do in this situation, and trying to go from there if it's something that I need to do quickly or that I have some sort of emotional doubt about. And that's another thing for me that is taking time, is to check in with my body to get some information on how to make a decision, because sometimes, my body will tell me, as in, if I'm, have something come up that I need to make a decision about, and I weigh out the options, and then I decide, okay, this is what I need to do, and then I develop a stomach ache, then that might be my body saying, hey, maybe you should reconsider, or there might be, some other things going on that I need to check into or look at. So that's a thing that in the last few years that I've been working on, is my mind-body connection and being able to check in and discern with that, because there's a lot of information there that I never paid attention to. Most of my life, I kept them separate. I've always been a kind of in my head kind of person, and it turns out that my head's connected to a body, and that there's a lot going on there, and there's a lot of information that I could get to make better decisions and to live a better life. So that's one of them. Another one was like, and I think most of us hear this early on, is what are your intentions? So it usually comes up when a newcomer says that they need to go to a bar with their friends for something, and people ask, well, what are your intentions with that? Are you going there for a concert? And if so, then are you, does somebody there know that you're sober or that you're in sobriety, so that you have kind of an accountability buddy? And if not, why have you decided not to tell anyone? And is this really something that you need to do? Or also, like, say you want to get a new car. Well, do you have the money to get the new car? Why do you want it? Do you want it just to look good or to impress, a new person in your life? Or, do you think that it means, that you have a certain status? So if you get the car, then you'll get that status. Or is it going to put you in greater debt? And is your car okay to get you by until you're in a better position? And those are things that I needed to deal with for my own life and look at. And they weren't, always fun because, I wanted to be wild, cool, free and stuff. And I guess I became less and less cool the more sober I got, but more and more, responsible and rational, and ultimately, a person that I like now, which was what I wanted when I got into sobriety. Is I wanted to live a sober life and not be completely insane, and that I was really hoping that this would be a way to do that, and it has been. I am not completely insane, no. At least not totally. Maybe 75, 25, I don't know, depending on the day. But yeah, I've learned a lot about, decision making, how to research things. I do sometimes still get into the analysis paralysis of research when I need to make a big decision. Like I recently had to get a new phone, and I've had my phone since 2016, which is a long time for a phone. And so having to look and research and then ask other people what kind of phones they have and how they're working for them and how do they use them, the most, and see if, those are all things that match up with what I use my phone the most for and what would be best for me. All of those things I've learned how to do in recovery.
That's a lot better than being impulsive. I mean, being impulsive was something that I had a hard time growing out of. There's some good comments out here. Jackie says that the practice to decide to committing to self-care isn't selfish. And, those are the types of things I really needed to hear early on that sometimes I didn't hear, because the group I went to at the time when I was a newcomer, they were really focused on self-centeredness, and almost anything I did was selfish. Such a selfish bastard. But here's another nice comment. He says that making decisions based on logic alone can be disastrous. Making decisions based on emotions alone can be disastrous. Making decisions based on intentions alone can be disastrous. So it's like, you really need to use everything that you got in making decisions.
Right. I think that's a lot of how the community or the fellowship comes in as well. And I think that, there are things in our society now that we could probably benefit from within the program, which a lot of people probably wouldn't, or would be surprised to hear me say. But the idea of, a collective of asking other people and getting a lot of different input so that you're not being impulsive and just, making your decision on one thing, I think is helpful and helps you make better decisions because there's a lot of different angles that other people might have thought of that I hadn't. So, say buying a house, I wouldn't have looked before at where the vents are placed and how old the roof is, which sounds strange to homeowners, but I didn't know any of that because I was never a homeowner. And, my family was very poor and nobody owned their homes. And so I didn't know about changing filters or anything, lawn keep up, how long you're supposed to do that. I lived in apartments, or we just didn't take care of our lawn as a kid. We were terrible neighbors.
I had a similar experience because we moved every couple of years. We never lived in one place long enough to have to do any upkeep. So now I'm in a house for we've been here for 15 or 16 years or whatever. And it's like, oh yeah, you actually have to fix things around here. Stuff first begins to fall apart. Yeah. Congratulations to Alex out there. He's on September 1st, 6 years of sobriety. He just found us. He says he went from being a Catholic to a Protestant to agnostic. That's an interesting journey in itself right there. There were some decisions he had to make.
Yeah,
about
definitely.
Who he was. Something that I used to hear a lot, that I think we all hear a lot, is not to make any decisions, or probably more in the line of don't make any major changes, life changes during your first year of sobriety. And I gave that some thought, and I think that it's more correct to say, don't make any unnecessary or unneeded changes during your first year of sobriety, because there are, like I was saying, during my first 90 days, I was dealing with some serious decisions I needed to make, about just to get to that first level of security so that I could maintain my sobriety. I had a lot of changes I needed to make, serious life changes. So to say not to make any sort of a change or decision, I think is a little bit, maybe I'm just playing semantics, but it's the other things. It's like, maybe you shouldn't go quit your job and start a new business. Maybe you might want to wait before you get into a relationship. It's those kinds of decisions that I think people might be better to wait on, rather than just to jump in and make. But other decisions, you're going to be forced when you're newly sober. You're going to be forced to make some serious decisions that you've got to make. And in my case, looking back on it, I was, like I said earlier, I was just doing what I knew to do. I was just still, denying or not dealing with until the storm comes, and then I would get out of it somehow. I'd somehow come out of it. That's just the way I lived. But then after a couple of years, and for me, it was going through the steps, but after a couple of years, I learned to kind of examine myself and to really kind of think through and what was going on, what I needed to do, whether I needed to do it, talk it over with one person, talk it over with another person, so that by the time I actually had to make the decision, I was confident in what I was doing. And even if it didn't turn out right, it always seemed to be that, I knew that things things weren't, it wasn't like during my drinking days where, I could go to jail or something like that. It wasn't that major of a deal usually. And that was the nice thing about being sober, is that I could, life got a little bit more manageable, so that any decisions I had to make were not as consequential as they were earlier. But boy, those first 90 days, I was still dealing with all the consequences of my drinking and having to make decisions to get out of all that mess. Yeah, I was in,
Right. Yeah. And I think some of the stuff about, the first year, I think it would be better if people just kind of talked about why that's kind of a saying, or why it's a suggestion, and, I mentioned before, for me, it was mentioned, the relationship thing, because after a year of sobriety, I would hopefully, have a different perspective on life and on myself. Hopefully I would have better self-esteem. And so it was fair to say that I might not be interested in the same type of person that I was, in early sobriety. And that for me turned out to be true. And if somebody did say that, and so that kind of made sense to me. It was, weird at the time, because I think sometimes we have a hard time of projecting into the future, a reasonable way that we might be. It's usually, fantasized or idealized. But putting it in terms of that, if I do this work, then, hopefully I'll have changed, had a psychic change, if not a spiritual experience, and be closer to the person that I would like to be. And so that person, would make better decisions about relationships. And so that's, why it was good for me, at least that particular one. But yeah, I agree with, I know some people who've been in bad marriages where the other person is still drinking, and, so to tell them that, you shouldn't get divorced.
That's a decision you've got to make. It's a decision you've got to make, because it's your survival. And that's the whole thing. You have that those issues that are really, your sobriety depends on it. Those are decisions you're going to have to make, and so yeah, that's just something that that I was thinking about, is when I would hear that, it was more. I think it's more important just to look at those other things, those unnecessary changes, that will come later. That after you kind of get the basics covered, then you can make those other things. You can do those other things that to kind of self-actualize or whatever, to grow as a human being.
Yeah, it's probably not great for, your third week of sobriety to get hitched to somebody that you met in the room, and then, fly to, Zimbabwe to go on an adventure. And then, 2 days there, you realize you've really made a mistake.
And Angela, when I've talked to like experts in addiction, they talk about, and I don't quite understand all of this, but they talk about how when you become addicted to alcohol, how it affects your brain. It changes your brain, okay? So that your cognitive abilities have been diminished somewhat. You especially when you're inebriated, your frontal cortex or whatever, you're not using it. You're not using that part of your brain where you think things through. And because of all the neurotransmitters that have been all messed up with the ups and downs of all the chemicals and so forth, it takes a while for your brain to kind of get back to where you can begin using your brain the way it's supposed to be used. Like I think I was using my very back of my lizard brain of survival. It's like, oh, wait for the forest to burn down and I'll figure a way out. It's like, that's just the way I lived. So I think that's one thing about during that first year, is that don't just, yes, you are going to have to deal with the crises that are going to follow you after you stop drinking. But, other things, let's just hold on there, because there is, it's like that Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You have to meet those basic needs before you can start making those bigger decisions. This Facebook user says that they are still learning to handle the fear surrounding the potential to make a bad decision and not being able to reverse it. The safe alternative can be staying stuck. See, that's what I did. I just didn't do anything. I just, out of fear, I just didn't do anything. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think that goes back, at least in my mind, to the idea that of, good versus bad decisions. I don't know that there's, I guess in some situations there's definitely a line, but sometimes you can make a good decision that has an outcome that, is not pleasant or fun, but it's still a good decision. And sometimes you can make a decision that is not good, but in the long run, may turn out to be the best route. And so, I think that this kind of, at least, what I'm reading on here, may be, one of those situations. And particularly if it's in regards to work or relationship or something like that, then those are big things, and those are things that if you don't have a community yet that you trust, that perhaps taking it to a professional, to a counselor, to a therapist, somebody along those lines to be a voice of reason to help you talk through it, so that you make the best decision that you can with the information you have at that particular time. And in which case, then that is, the best decision. You've gone through several steps to try to ensure that you're making the decision in the most appropriate way, making it intentional, that kind of thing.
We have a caller. Let's see
Okay.
who this is. Hello.
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 Hey,
How are you?
It's Jackie.
Hey, Jackie. How are you?
Hey, Jackie.
Good.
Can you guys hear me okay?
I hear you great.
Oh, good. I just thought I'd call in and talk about some decision stuff. And, I'm all about pausing before we make a decision, which is also, one of the silly, well, they're not silly, but like the think it through kind of thing that they would say. If you want to drink, think it through, where's it going to take you? And, when you're even talking about these hard decisions and being afraid to make the wrong decision, I don't know. I feel like, and again, I've been sober for a long while now. I couldn't have done this at the beginning for sure, but I do feel like there's very few bad decisions that I couldn't just live with the outcome. Like even if it is a job or a relationship, or I don't know, like I've gotten the tools to realize how to live with really when bad stuff happens, even if it's my decision, So I don't know. I feel, I guess, really lucky about that. And I want to tell this story, man. I knew this guy in AA, and this happened probably 15 years ago, and I still remember it. He worked in a job for a really long time, got paid really well, good benefits, but he felt like it was time for a change, and he got a job offer. And I saw him about 6 months later in a meeting, and I said, how's the new job? How'd it go? And he's like, it's terrible. I hate it. And I said, you made the wrong decision. He's like, no, I made a decision. Yeah, I just hate the job. And I thought that was really profound,
I had that
we can
exact
make wrong
situation. Yeah, I made a job.
Really?
A job change. Yeah, I had been working at this job for like 5 years. I just got married. I'd been married for like 6 months, and I decided to take this other job, and because I was wanting to make more money and so forth. And I took that job, and I found out that I absolutely hated it. So I left a job that I loved, where everybody loved me, and I took this job that was absolutely miserable. I had a boss that was just horrible. But the thing is, I'm still at that job. and what happened is my boss changed, and now I have the best boss in the world, and I love my job. So there you go. So things can change. And I just had to deal with the boss that I had. And I learned a lot from the process too. So there you go. Anyway, sorry for interrupting you.
Yeah. Well, and lastly, I think that, I think most people mean well when we come into AA, but I think it's this kind of, again, my pet peeve is the one size fits all, and people come in really, I think, different. I mean, I think we're the same but different, and like John, you and I came in around the same age and around the same time, and I feel like we're in similar headspace when I hear you, share. So yeah, I needed a lot of help, and I was a mess. But there's a new woman in my life right now who's got a couple kids, and she's married, and she's got a job, and she's just different than I am.
Yeah.
I don't know how to explain it. And so sometimes I think, it probably wouldn't have been good for me to make certain decisions, but I think she's actually capable of it. She seems a little more mature than I was, and
because she's already got a lot of the basic security already covered. That you and I might not have had.
Yeah.
We came with just not having a lot of the basics. Food, shelter, all that kind of stuff. Taken care of.
Yeah,
So yeah,
exactly. And then, sorry, really last now is I'll never forget, and I think I probably have shared this with you before, maybe even on here, but I had, I was a victim of trauma when I got sober, and I needed therapy. When I took the drugs and alcohol away, all my feelings came up. And so it was like, okay, do I get high or do I jump off a bridge? Because I can't handle this not being numb. And people, at least one person, maybe more, said, you should not go to therapy until you're a year sober. And that, luckily somebody else said, no, go to therapy.
Yeah, I'm so glad someone else said that.
That's what she thought. Yeah, no major decisions, blah, blah, blah. And, and so I used to think that, don't get in a relationship. I know what they mean by romantic relationship, but man, when I got sober, I was in such intense, intimate relationships with everybody in the firm. Not romantic, but, so anyway. So those are my thoughts.
Something else they should probably say, rather than don't make any decisions, don't let someone else make decisions for you.
Right.
Because that's what happens a lot of times.
Yeah, that'll put a lot of sponsors out of work, huh? So maybe it is something we should do.
That's great. So yeah, thanks you guys for doing this for so long now. It's really awesome.
Oh, thank you for calling.
I just made a decision. To get a puppy.
Oh.
And
that was a funny John.
But here's what's funny. I really wanted one, and my husband didn't. And I was feeling really comfortable with that. Like, then I could just be mad at him for not wanting one, and then I could just have this idea of what it would be like to have a puppy. And then all of a sudden he's like, if you want a puppy, get a puppy. And now we have a puppy, and I'm exhausted, and I'm like, why would you still do this? So anyway. So that's just a little bit of anyway, it's fine. Puppies grow up, so it'll be nice.
Well, I love dogs.
Anyway, thanks, you guys.
All right, Jackie.
Yeah.
Thank you for calling.
All right. Okay,
No, my wife decided to get a dog, and she was like looking on the internet at the Wayside Waves at all these dogs, right? And so I knew she was going to get one, and I didn't really want a dog. I was happy with the 2 cats. But I wasn't going to stop her because I know she loves dogs. So anyway, I love that dog, and I love that dog. And she's like the best dog I've ever known. And she's really important to me now when I'm working and I'm feeling stressed, I take her for a walk, and it just helps me so much. So I love dogs. Get a dog. They're good for you. Anna says she's learned to make better bad decisions, but I had to be willing to make mistakes. Being sober allowed her to remember those decisions and learn not to get too attached to outcomes. Important. Expectations are premeditated resentments. Oh, that's a good quote. I like that.
Yeah.
Expectations are premeditated resentments. Oh, that's really good.
Yeah. And I think that kind of goes with what was said before about being comfortable in being uncomfortable. If the decision wasn't something or didn't turn out exactly as you wanted, that you can live with that and be able to be like, that's just the way it's going to be. And again, I think that takes a little bit of sobriety, some work, either within sobriety or through counselors and stuff, and then some maturity. Some of it just comes with age too, of being able to be okay with with negative or less than pleasant outcomes.
Yeah. I, like I say, when I took that new job, I just thought, oh my God, what a horrible mistake, because it was like, the job that I left, it was just like the perfect culture, and I was just so comfortable there. And I just operated on this assumption that must be the way it is everywhere. But when I went to this other company, they were in the midst of this huge upheaval. People were being laid off right and left. The culture was changing because some other company was kind of forcing it to do things its way and everything. It was just a huge mess. And I was in the middle of it as a new guy. And I thought, oh my God. But, things turned out just great. I made it through those tough times, and I still had the better pay. I had the better benefits, and I was still learning for my job, and, things were just fine. So things turned out really well for me anyway.
Yeah. So how long did you have to be uncomfortable in that?
Oh man,
decision?
a long time. And it really had to do with my boss, only my boss. If I didn't have him, it would have been okay. But he was really abusive, and he was a sarcastic person, and he was constantly aiming his sarcasm at me. And it was just horrible. But he would even make fun of me for not drinking. If we were at some social thing, he would be getting drunk or whatever, and then make fun of me because I wasn't drinking. That's what kind of a jerk he was, so, but yeah, so I can't remember how long it was, but it was probably 10 years I had to deal with that guy.
Wow.
I know.
That's a long time.
And the only thing that got me through it was, first of all, I knew how to deal with difficult people like him anyway, the best I could anyhow. And plus there were a lot of good people that I worked with. I had a great, my coworkers were great. The job that I was doing was okay, and all that kind of stuff. It was just that one thing. Looking back on it now, though, I should have complained. I should have done something about him, but I didn't. I just tried to deal with him, the best I could. But I could have been proactive, and I could have talked to him more firmly. And if he didn't change, I could have gone to HR. There's a lot of different things I could have done to make my situation better. I just didn't do it. And instead I kind of internalized things and worked on whatever I was feeling, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I survived.
Yeah.
So.
And sometimes, that's another thing with somebody else mentioning being in a situation that may not be good for them for too long because of the difficulty of making a decision. And so sometimes that's where, again, professional help would have, been something that could help you either stay like you did in your situation, which, you did, so by having an outlet like AA or a counselor or whatever can help you stay in uncomfortable places long enough to be able to either make a better decision or for things to change. A lot of my problems with making decisions too quickly was because something was uncomfortable and I wanted it to change as quick as possible. And so I wouldn't do the due diligence to make a good decision. I just needed to change how I felt. And before I did that with alcohol, and before alcohol, I did that with food. And so, there's a lot of ways that we can do that, healthy and unhealthy. But your comment reminded me of in early sobriety, there was a woman in my home group who shared that she had been, her boss had sent her to a workshop on dealing with difficult people. and that she, said, yeah, I definitely need to go to this workshop because some of my coworkers are the worst. And she got there, and as they started describing, what a difficult person was, she realized she was the difficult person.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And so that gave her some perspective, and she started to feel better about her job and make different decisions so that people, hated her less, I guess. But yeah, I always thought that was hilarious. And I just loved that she shared that. That's one of the great things, about AA is the sharing of our stories, and why, our stories are kind of a superpower is that I haven't seen that woman in a long time. I changed home groups. I'm hoping she's still sober, but we don't go in the same AA communities. But that story and her telling it has stayed with me all this time, and is something that that I think about when I'm dealing with difficult people.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. And good for her. I love it when, somebody can say, oh, you know what? It is me. I am, I am the problem. It's interesting. A lot of the people from the Facebook group are talking about expectations. And I never even thought about expectations as being part of the decision-making thing. But yeah, I can see how it is, because if you're pondering some sort of a decision and you have an expectation for an outcome for that decision, and then that expectation isn't met, I can see how that could be problematic, and you can just really fall down, from that. So it's like you do have to figure out a way, I guess, to manage those expectations during that decision-making process.
Well, right. And I think that I learned that going through the fourth step, because that's where a lot of my resentments came from with other people, was because of expectations that weren't met. And as I, looked at that some more, I realized that oftentimes the expectations weren't met because I didn't tell the person that I had them, and so I expected them to be psychic and do or behave in a way, that I wanted them to. And when they didn't, then I got resentful. So I think, in a lot of situations, it makes sense to make clear, what the expectations are, or, the guidelines. I mean, I see people in marriages in the last few years rewrite their vows that are actually more of like, this is what I'm committing to, and it has stuff like, being kind, or they'll put something funny in like never buying a minivan, or, things like that. And so it's a little more clear, what the expectations are. And so then, they can either be renegotiated in the future. But most of my life, I didn't know that I had them, and I didn't set them for, friendships or relationships or, jobs or things like that. And now I think that some of that is built in some ways. Oftentimes at jobs, you have a job description, and you can ask at the interview, what are the things that I'll be required to do that's outside of this description? And sometimes it's like, well, you're the person closest to the coffee, so you have to get here, a half an hour early to make coffee for everyone, things like that. And so, as long as you know that when you accept the job, then, less of a resentment. So yeah, being honest and upfront about what your needs are. And again, that came from going through and doing the work I needed to do on myself, so that I knew what my expectations are, what my needs were. And, and sometimes I'm still confused, and sometimes resentments come up that I wasn't aware of, but I've definitely got much better at it.
Peter's comment is interesting. He says that the longer he lives, the more bad decisions he makes, and the harder it is to remember that he's also made some good ones along the way. Yeah, I'm getting kind of long in the tooth, so it's like, yeah, I can see where I've made a lot of bad decisions, perhaps, but it's just because I'm much older now, and I've made more decisions. But like Peter says, that most of the bad decisions I've been able to get through. And I've made a lot of good decisions along the way too. And then Joe C has an interesting kind of a graphical
emoji-filled comment. Yeah.
Yes, no,
so
pray about it, LOL, write about it, call a friend, do more research, ask Siri. That's a good one. That's it. I'll ask Siri.
Yeah, I think that my Google Assistant would be pretty upset with me if I asked Siri about things. So.
Joe, did somebody hack your YouTube account? I don't know if that's Joe.
Could be.
Somebody actually hacked Roger's Facebook account the other day, and I knew it because he sent me like this really weird message.
Yes, actually, I got that too, and I've learned to identify them now. You know, all of them say, "Are you in this?" And and
it's like
one of them was like a major. It was from a friend that I knew really well and knew some real, deep, dark things about me. And then, and it said, you're in this video, you'd be so embarrassed. And that's how I knew that, that it wasn't her, because she already has all the videos of me, whatever. And so I'm like, you guys failed on that one because you picked the wrong person to send that to.
I'm glad I haven't clicked on it. I guess if I clicked on it, it would probably hack me, I guess. I don't know. It's so weird. It's so weird, all this hacking stuff.
There's stuff that gets written into there that can give them the information. And but the best is not to do that. Or if it seems like it's important, ask them to send you a link to another thing, or describe the link so you can Google it yourself, things like that. Generally, if I send something, I write about what I'm sending so that they know that it's actually me, sending them something rather than some sort of a malicious.
These tech decisions that we have to make. Do I click on that?
I know. That'd be a whole different show. So
they actually test us at work. They send us these emails, to test us if we can recognize a phishing email. And it's really kind of funny. Yeah, it's hilarious. Some of these emails we get, because some people will ask each other, "Did you get this email? What is it?" It's a test. It's a test. It's like we always get. Anyway, I pass them more often than not.
Right. That's funny.
Peter, it's always a pleasure to do this. I love doing this. And Jackie mentioned that we've been doing these Friday live streams for a while now. Man, we started back in March, didn't we? It's hard to believe that's been going on this long, but I don't see any end in sight.
Right. Yeah. Unless people are just like, nobody logs in at all and it's just you and me talking, which, is how we did all of the STEP podcasts anyway. So yeah, unless one of us finds something better to do on Fridays, we're probably going to keep doing this.
Yeah, I know. I wonder if those of you that are in the Facebook chat and the YouTube chat, if like, is there anything else to do on Friday? Probably I know there's another live stream to listen to, because who is it? What are they? Oh man, Joe, help me out. It's the Sense Right Now podcast. They also do a live stream on Friday. Maybe we should crash theirs one of these days if you can do that. I don't know if it's possible. Yeah, I bet we could. We could probably send like some messages over there or something while they're doing theirs.
We could just call in. I mean,
we
if
could
they
call in. Yeah. They have a pretty good podcast, and they're also from Missouri, which is cool.
Nice. Yeah. Oh, we're going to do one in the morning. When are we doing that?
Oh, that's right. We need to pick a time. We've had people from Europe that have talked about, can you guys do a live stream that is, accessible for me in Europe, so I don't have to stay up till 2:00 in the morning. So I don't know, Angela, why don't you just pick a day and we'll do it? I think a weekend would be good. Either, Saturday or Sunday morning. Either one is good for me. If you have a preference, I'll do it.
Yeah, Saturday would be better for me.
Okay.
I have several Sunday commitments.
Yeah, maybe Saturday morning. Yeah. We'll have to look at
church, but other than that, no, I'm just kidding. But yeah.
Yeah, because if you did it like 10:00 in the morning, that would be like 5:00, I think, in England and Paris and all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
In Europe, anyway. Europe and that whole section of the globe. It's not just England; it's everything above and below England.
Right. Yeah. I'll have to check Abu Dhabi. I think that's about the same. I think it's 8 or 9 hours.
Yeah.
And some networks as well there. So
okay, we'll do that, and we'll announce it so that people will know, and so we'll have our European live stream.
Woo-hoo. Yeah. That'll be fun.
Nice to see people supporting each other out there in both our Facebook group and here in YouTube. We have a nice little community, I think. We might argue once in a while, but for the most part, we're pretty nice to each other.
Yeah, I think it's pretty helpful to each other and supportive, and yeah, in general, sometimes people are reactive, but I think for the most part, other people recognize that and do not take the bait to be reactive.
Right.
That's what I appreciate. So
one thing that I've learned is if somebody says that, this is so weird, if somebody hates AA, but they're in an AA group, they're in an AA Facebook group, but they hate AA, just leave them alone. Just let them hate on it, because there's nothing you can say. Because it's like, I say, oh, that's cool. You can hate AA. Go start something new. Don't you tell me to start something new. It's like, Jesus Christ, there's no way to win. So the best thing to do is just leave them alone. It's like, okay, you hate AA, so hang out in this AA group and make yourself miserable, whatever you want to do. I don't know, but I know I'm not going to complain about it anymore. But yeah, because I was trying to think, okay, I understand that you don't like it. So let me, that's cool. This, don't even try to help them out anyway.
Yeah. Nope. There's a lot of polarization in our world right now. And so, I think that some of us who, are in recovery have some tools that hopefully if we use them, we can be, examples, I guess, attractions rather than promotion of love and tolerance.
Angela, it's something I need to say before we leave. For those of you who don't know, there is going to be an excellent webinar tomorrow on emotional sobriety. And I talked about this last week, and I'm actually going to be the stage manager for this thing. And I'm a little bit nervous about that, but there's a link where you can click on it to register. But basically it's going to be a panel discussion on emotional sobriety based upon Bill Wilson's letter about emotional sobriety, which is kind of interesting. He talks about how his problems seem to be, what is it? I can't remember anymore. Anyway, emotional sobriety. Check it out. It'll be nice.
All right.
Go register.
Cool.
It's free. So
very nice.
We've almost filled up the hour.
Yeah, 2 minutes now.
I know you hate this music, but I actually have grown to like it.
It's your podcast, so you get to pick the music.
The 70s was a wonderful time.
Well, I can't complain. I was born then, so, it wasn't that bad. But some of the music choice.
So there you go. That's it. That's another episode of AA Beyond Belief, the podcast. Thank you for listening. For those of you who would like to help out our site and podcast, you can do that in a couple of ways. You can go on over to Patreon at patreon.com/AABeyondBelief and be a patron for just a small amount of money each month. You can also contribute through PayPal at paypal.me/AABeyondBelief, or just go to our website, aabeyondbelief.org, and click on the donate button. But as always, we know times are tough. Don't worry about it if you don't got it. It's no big deal. So that's it, folks. We'll be back again next week, next Friday, for another live stream, and we will announce when we do our European version. That'll be coming up real soon. Okay. Happy Friday, everybody, and have a nice weekend. Bye.
Bye-bye.